Hello YouTube, I'm making this video for other WASP survivors of the troubled teen industry and survivors of behavioral modification programs in general. And today I just wanted to read a book that I found online, an ebook called It's All the Rage, an in-depth look at behavioral modification in the United States by Angela Smith. It's a really interesting book. Highly recommend you read it, but for those of you that are like me and prefer Audible, I'll just read a couple chapters out of it that I found extremely interesting. It says on the front here, all rights reserved, this book and any part of it may be reproduced or transmitted in any form by any means, electronic or mechanical, including photocopying, recording, or by any information storage and retrieval system without the express written permission of the author if done without profit and sources cited. Please direct request, blah, blah, blah. Okay, so basically it's permission, so it's all the rage. Oh, it's kind of backwards. Anyways, yeah, so I just wanted to read the chapter on government corruption. Holy crap. So section 2, chapter 7, government corruption. In 1976, George H.W. Bush was appointed director of the Central Intelligence Agency by President Gerald Ford. The Central Intelligence Agency, or the CIA, had been operating a number of behavior modification, aka mind control, experiments since the 1950s. Richard Helms was director of the CIA for the early years of research. On August 3rd, 1977, the U.S. Senate met regarding the experiments and earlier in the decade ruled that these experiments were unethical and violated human rights. In the early 1970s, the federal government invested in a new behavior modification program aimed at drug users called the SEED in Ohio and Florida. Maya Salvis reports in 1971, the federal government gave a grant to a Florida organization called the SEED, which applied Synanon's methods to teenagers, even those only suspected of trying drugs. In 1974, Congress opened an investigation into such behavior modification programs, finding that the SEED had used methods, quote, similar to the highly refined brainwashing techniques employed by the North Koreans, unquote. The bad publicity led some supporters of the SEED to create a copycat organization under a different name, Straight Inc. It was co-founded by Mel Sembler, a Bush family friend. At this point, readers may be concerned regarding the purpose of including information on the CIA's behavior modification experiments. It is important to understand the history of behavior modification in the United States and the motivations behind allowing such a fraudulent and abusive industry to flourish in our country. There are three primary reasons that behavior modification programs have found sanctuary in America. The first is that the United States, concerned about brainwashing in communist countries such as Russia and North Korea, believed it needed to fully understand the technology of behavior modification for national security reasons. John Marks reported, they experimented with dangerous and unknown techniques on people who had no idea what was happening. They systematically violated the free will and mental dignity of their subjects, and, like the German Nazis, they chose to victimize special groups of people whose existence they considered, out of prejudice and convenience, less worthy than their own. Wherever their extreme experiments went, the CIA sponsors picked for subjects their own equivalents of the Nazis, Jews, and Gypsies, mental patients, prostitutes, foreigners, drug addicts, and prisoners. The ethical arguments against the research conducted on uninformed individuals without their consent are apparent. The political argument that such experimentation was necessary for national security purposes fails when the ethical codes of informed consent of any participant in scientific research, as determined by international laws on human rights, i.e. Nuremberg Code, is lacking. If these experiments were in fact, quote, necessary, then they should have been conducted professionally after obtaining informed consent from participants and providing for care of those who suffer permanent damage as a result of such dangerous experimentation. The argument that it was necessary for national security purposes in order to understand communist technologies in controlling human behavior was not the only argument provided by the CIA regarding the purpose of the experiments. John Marks reported, CIA's research went further than that and was intended to give the United States its own broad capacity to manipulate human behavior in the age-old quest for secret control. Nearly every agency CIA document stressed goals like controlling an individual to the point where he will do our bidding against his will, and even against such fundamental laws of nature as self-preservation. Nearly every agency, I already just read that. In a democratic society that celebrates freedom and diversity, the goal of controlling the population through deception and manipulation is arguably treasonous. But this was the stated goals of the CIA regarding the development of behavior modification techniques or technologies. The second motivation, beyond the desire of learning and using behavior modification, appears to be financial. Money funnels to and from behavior modification programs, politicians, and federal funds in what could be considered a giant money laundering scheme. The CIA set up charitable foundations, including the Josiah Macy Jr. Foundation and Jessica Fund for Medical Research, in order to funnel federal grant money through the, quote, charities to those doing the research. The concern here is that the public is not privy to the current charities that are fronts for CIA operations, and donors may not know what they are funding when they donate to a charity. WWASP, WASP, and Parent Universal Research Experts, PURE, both claim to be nonprofit organizations and receive the tax benefits associated. However, both WASP and PURE are for-profit businesses using highly sophisticated bookkeeping skills to maintain the illusion of nonprofit social work. In Green versus Sue Schiff, PURE et al. Okay, just a moment. We're talking about like MKUltra stuff here. Very interesting. Okay, so Schiff in no way disclosed that she was being paid for referring RG and others to defendant focal point on a per-child basis. Contrary to Schiff's misrepresentations, defendant Horlacher later disclosed that Focal Point Academy pays Schiff money for each student she refers to the school. The reality later discovered that defendant Schiff had in fact set up PURE based on the business model of a Utah entity known as WASP that she engaged in protracted litigation with. I was in a WASP program, so yeah. Anyways, Pathway Family Center, a Straight Inc. spinoff program, was a registered 501c3 nonprofit in Indiana. The final Pathway Family Center program closed in 2009, but Terry Nestle, the founder of Pathway Family Center, is reportedly currently starting a new scam in Michigan. The political connections and support extended far beyond the tax benefits, and lax regulation on private nonprofit organizations and financial incentives are a difficult single motivation to understand given the nature of what is happening in behavior modification programs. I agree with that. But the money is a key element to understanding some of the reasons for no regulation and the continued allowance of these businesses to operate. I'm glad somebody else sees this, because I see it too. Okay, Maya Salvitz reported, Straight Inc. was co-founded by Mel Sembler, a Bush family friend who would become the GOP's 2000 finance chair, and who heads Louis Scooter Libby's legal defense fund. By the mid-'80s, Straight was operating in 7 states. First Lady Nancy Regan declared it her favorite anti-drug program. As with the Seed, abuse was omnipresent, including beatings and kidnappings of adults participants. Facing 7-figure legal judgments, it closed in 1993. But loopholes in state laws and a lack of federal oversight allowed shuttered programs to simply change their names and reopen, often with the same staff in the same state, even in the same building. What the hell? Straight spinoffs like the Pathway Family Center are still in business. Pathway Family Center has closed since this article was written. In another article, Salvitz reported, Mitt Romney has kicked troubled teen titan Robert Litchfield to the curb. Litchfield's organization, the Worldwide Association of Specialty Schools and Programs, WASP, previously WASP, is being sued in a class action suit by over 100 plaintiffs alleging serious sexual, emotional, and physical abuse. In the worst cases, teens were beaten, kept in stressed positions, sleep deprived, made to walk thousands of laps on a hot desert track, forced to eat their own vomit, and held in dog cages. Mexican police shot footage of the dog cages and the track, which was aired on Inside Edition. Another lawsuit alleges educational fraud by one facility. That facility was already made to pay parents back over $1 million for falsely claiming to provide legitimate New York State high school diplomas in one of the largest educational fraud judgments in New York history. Litchfield was Romney's Utah co-chair for finance, and he has been relieved of that position, quote, until the lawsuit is resolved in the positive, which we are confident will happen, end quote. WASP spokesperson Ken K. Told Radar. That person's disgusting anyways. This is the same Ken K. who said under oath in another civil suit that he did not know whether sex between staff and teens in WASP programs was necessarily abusive. What the hell? But Romney's national finance co-chair Mel Sembler remains. All right, let me just adjust a little bit. Okay. So, the CIA invested in decades of behavior modification research involving involuntary and uninformed participants that came from a variety of vulnerable classes, including psychiatric patients, prisoners, drug addicts, and children in the state's custody. In 1971, the federal government invested in a new drug rehabilitation project called the SEED, which later spawned Straight Inc. In 1976, George H.W. Bush became director of the CIA. Mel Sembler was the founder of Straight Inc. George H.W. Bush and Mel Sembler are friends and business associates. Mel Sembler was the co-chair of 2008 presidential candidate Mitt Romney's national finance campaign. And in 2000, George W. Bush appointed Mel Sembler as U.S. ambassador to Italy. Sembler was satirically labeled Ambassador de Sade by the media. In the same article, it was reported that Governor Jeb Bush had officially made August 8th Betty Sembler Day to celebrate her work with Straight Inc., renamed Drug Free America Foundation in 1996. Clearly, a pattern has been established. What is more disturbing is that the Department of Homeland Security currently endorses a number of programs, including Abundant Life Academy, Provo Canyon School, Mount Bachelor Academy, recently closed for forcing girls to perform lap dances as therapy. The fuck? Anyways. And many other abusive behavior modification facilities throughout the United States. And beyond that, quote-unquote, former CIA agent Richard Y. Moody works for Eagle Ranch Academy and Turning Leaf Seminars, run out of St. George, Utah, the hometown of WASP. After Heel pointed out that Moody was working in the industry, his bio was removed from Eagle Ranch Academy's staff list online. However, he is still employed with the program. Interesting. I need a wine break, just a moment. Okay. Back to business. In the 2008 presidential election, Mitt Romney had Robert Litchfield and Mel Sembler handling key positions within his campaign. Romney also received large donations from Robert H. Christ, founder of Provo Canyon School and Logan River Academy, Jack L. Williams, founder of Provo Canyon School and Cinnamon Hills Youth Crisis Center, and Mitt Romney is part owner of Aspen Educational Group, the largest behavior modification umbrella corporation. It is apparent that Republican leaders and frontrunners are knee-deep in the defrauding of American families and the torture of American children. It's true. Money flows from industry leaders like Robert Christ, Robert Litchfield, and Mel Sembler directly into the campaigns and dealings of the Bush family, Mitt Romney, and others. The programs get a return on their investment. The industry faces no regulation, or in places like Utah, is allowed to self-regulate. That's stupid. Anyways, and on top of this, abusive behavior modification programs receive millions in federal taxpayer dollars every year through grants and social services. I'm never paying taxes again. Just before his election in November of 2000, George W. Bush pledged billions to the efforts of Mel Sembler / Drug Free America Foundation. Here's a quote. Our organization invited nearly 24 of America's best leaders in the areas of drug prevention, drug treatment, scientific research, drug interdiction, and community anti-drug coalitions to participate. Collectively, we developed a list of strategies that we believe will effectively address the challenges of drug use and abuse for the next 4 years, said Drug Free America Foundation's Executive Director Calvina Fay. What a thrill it was to listen to Governor Bush as he outlined his plan last week. Ugh. Bush pledged $2.767 billion in new incentives to combat illegal drug use under his leadership. In 2007, the Drug Free America Foundation received over $1 million in taxpayer money. Disgusting. Teen Challenge received over $2 million from taxpayer money in the state of Minnesota in 2007. Teen Challenge continues to receive public funds to operate, and it is one of the few residential treatment programs endorsed by the Drug Free America Foundation. Aspen Education Group also receives state and federal funds for the children placed in their programs through foster care and court orders. Provo Canyon School and WASPs also take children placed by government agencies and also receive federal funds. Millions of taxpayer dollars are covering special education plans for school districts unwilling to meet the needs of their students, and difficult or inconvenient students are regularly being sent away through their own schools to behavior modification programs. The third reason for the support of the behavior modification industry by elites is that it provides a pool of children from which sex slaves and hostile style torture, murder victims can be harvested. In 1996, former Nebraska Senator John W. DeCamp wrote and published an extensive report on the corruption, sexual abuse, and ritualistic torture and murder of children harvested from various residential youth programs by high-level politicians in America's elite. The report was called The Franklin Cover-Up and is available through AWI Inc. In one of DeCamp's reports, he recounts the experience of two victims. Last year, she met VP George Bush and saw him again at one of the parties Larry Lawrence E. King Jr. gave while on a Washington, D.C. trip. At some of these parties, there are just men. Nellie said she had been seen sodomy committed at those parties. Then she, Loretta, age 9, did begin going to the parties again, and they lasted for another 6 months. On one occasion, she threatened to tell her mother that the men were having sex with her and that they knew she was only 9, but the men indicated that they would kill anyone who told about the activities. That's horrible. Okay. The parties arranged by Larry King, where children were used for sex and morbid entertainment, were attended by officials of the Reagan Bush administration and members of Congress from both political parties. Another boy reported on Lawrence E. King Jr., quote, the officer said, Carol Sitt, FCRB, confirmed that Larry King had been there, had contributed money to the group home, and when he left, 3 boys came forward and said that they had been abused by him while he was there. DeCamp further reported that King had been involved with CIA and the Iran-Contra arms transfers. In regards to the association between Lawrence E. King Jr. and residential youth care facilities, DeCamp reported the Omaha corporations, Union Pacific Railroad, ConAgra, Mutual of Omaha, etc., that bankrolled Larry King and Franklin are also the major sponsors of youth organizations. Many executives of these firms sit on the boards of the youth care facilities. Key members of the Omaha business community did nothing to help and plenty to wreck the Franklin Committee's investigation into the sexual abuse, ritual torture, and murder of children. DeCamp further reported on the notes of investigator Gary Caradori. A girl named Marcy remembered being flown to Texas for a Republican convention because another girl had swiped a matchbook from the hotel and the address was in Texas. The children were flown all over the country to be used and exploited sexually. Another girl, Joni, stated that she remembered that the children had been exploited sexually in Texas, and she indicated that it was the feeling this activity had been occurring for several years. DeCamp also reported that George Bush is involved in this child abuse case, and that is why all these people have been dying. He continued, lauded by the Reagan and Bush administration as a showcase for the privatization of social services, Covenant House had expanded into Guatemala as a getaway to South America. According to intelligence community sources, the purpose was procurement of children from South America for exploitation in a pedophile ring. And that's the end of that chapter. If you guys have not looked up Mkultra and gone down that rabbit hole, what are you doing with your life? No, just kidding. But you really should, because... So I went on a Tinder date one time with this guy, random dude, cool person. And this is right after I started getting my memories back about this place that I was at. And, we were hanging out at the park and I was telling him about it. And he asked me, he's like, have you ever heard of Mkultra? I was like, no, what's that? He was like, look it up when you get home. And I did. That's what they're talking about in here. Modern day mind control experimentation on a large scale. Not trying to be a conspiracy theorist, but there's a lot of ties there that are pretty glaringly obvious that that's what's going on, I think, in my opinion. I'm really grateful to the person that wrote this book because, how amazing that they would let people have this for free just to help people to understand what the fuck really happened. And I, for one, full-heartedly agree that that's what was going on. I'm going to end this one. I'll probably do more commentary later.